Okay, today on the bench we have an SBE Sidebander IV. See underneath the tape there. I'm trying to protect the bezel on this because this radio is in extremely nice physical condition. I wouldn't say it was completely dead when I got it in. It's not mine, it's customer's radio. It turned on. That's about the only thing you could say for it. The light came on, that bulb and that bulb. Now, I've already done a little bit of diagnostics on it. The PLL unit was bad. It had no output on this. See this little ground around here? That little connection right there. That would be your output from the PLL unit. And there was nothing there. It was dead. So before I even went into diagnosing, the first thing I did was I recapped the PLL board. And all it has on the other. I'm going to go ahead and recap the rest of the radio also because I'm restoring this for the customer. But it only has 5 electrolytic capacitors on it. It has 2 aluminum electrolytics, and actually these are still here, the 3 tantalums that were on there. So they've been replaced, and I now have output out of the PLL unit. So that did fix that, but it's still dead. So there's no doubt in my mind there's probably more bad electrolytic capacitors in this. Now, if you are not familiar with this radio, you're probably, or actually I should say, if you're familiar maybe with the Viking radios, the Johnson Viking, 4740, you might be looking at this radio thinking, damn, why does this thing look so familiar? Well, probably because they're not the same, but they're so damn close in reverse that, you probably can't really tell. There are differences. In the Vikings, the PLL module, or box, is over here. This one, it's on this side. Even this board, a lot of stuff is backwards. These 2 alignment transformers would be over here. A lot of everything, it's almost like it's inverted. Your audio IC, it's over here. Your finals are over here. The power supply in this one, so if it was a Viking, would be over here. It's literally almost a mirror image of the Johnson Viking 4740. PLL unit is a little bit different. Like I say, there are minor differences, but they're so few and far between that you could almost diagnose one using the service manual for another. So now this is basically just a Sidebander 5, other than, this is a mobile radio, but very nice little radio. So we're going to get into recapping this. I can't say I saw any electrolytic capacitors that had leaked onto the circuit board, externally. I'm not talking about electrically leaking internally. I'm talking about actually leaking their electrolyte out onto the board. And because this is a double-sided board, so this is an early version, has traces on the top side here. So we definitely want to get these caps changed before they do that and damage the circuit board and then cause, horrible problems, and we'll have to go through and fix all that. So like I say, from the looks of it, from what I can see, it doesn't look like anything's leaked out yet. Now these are a bit of a nightmare to work on because, as you can see, oh boy, are the parts ever crammed down in there. You can see all the electrolytic capacitors, they're really shoved down in there. What makes it even more fun is all these wires, the interconnections here. So, but, yep, so there we go. SBE, or Sideband Engineers. This is the Sidebander IV. Like I say, very, very similar to the Johnson Viking 4740. More or less the same radio, inverted or reversed. So, to continue. You can see we have the radio upside down now. I've already removed the small RF shield from here, and tip on removing these. A lot of times they're very hard to get off. It's hard to remove all the solder to just get these things to fall off. So what I'll do is I use a eutectic solder, which has a very low melting point. I'll flood the area with even more solder, but the eutectic solder lowers the melting point as it mixes with the existing solder. And then you can just get a molten pool, pick up one end, same thing on the other side, wait till the entire pool's molten, then just pick the whole thing up. And then it's a lot easier to get in here with your desoldering iron and suck all the solder, vacuum all that solder out. But anyhow, I was inspecting the board, few questionable solder joints, fold up all the capacitors so I can see any components that are mounted to the bottom so I can see what's underneath of them. And I ran across something rather interesting here. I folded this capacitor up. Now all I got to do is try and get the camera to focus on it. You can grab a pointer here. You can see this white residue in here. It looks like something, and I actually looked at it under a microscope. It looks like it had arced in between the tip of this. I haven't even turned the board back over to see what it is, but the tip of this component, and there's a accompanying, get the light tilted in here. It's really hard to see on camera, but there's an actual black spot, and it's not flux. It looks like an arc spot. It looks like something, and I don't think it was this capacitor lead, because this wasn't down far enough to short out. It looks like something might have been bouncing around inside this chassis, and it shorted between this, because this is the ground plane and that terminal there. So yeah, there's, like I say, that was a kind of a giveaway. This white, it looks like smoke residue, which, you know, the magic smoke that you never want to see. So that may be a big part of our problem. If something shorted out there, it might have burned out something. So, because, well, flipping it over, I think there's a balanced modulator circuit area right here. So, we'll see. But yeah, there's some frequency generation, whatnot going in here, because there are crystals inside this area here. So, yeah, like I say, we got the PLL area fixed now. It looks like we might have a problem here. So, that, and I got to straighten up some other kind of crappy solder work. I can see somebody's been in here. I get the feeling somebody was trying to fix this, maybe, because I can see a couple spots where stuff's been resoldered, but it's kind of really blobbed in here. You know, right in this area, there's even a little solder ball stuck in between there. So I need to actually get some of these blobs vacuumed up off there, do a good proper soldering job on that. Yeah, same thing over here. They didn't clean up anything. You can see all the flux. Nobody's ever cleaned this board. Factory didn't, you know, just an extra step they didn't have to do, but you can see how thick the solder flux is on these things. When you clean them off, oh my god, you'll just see the brown goop just, it's like a sheet. It just slides off because they're so dirty and nasty. But it'll be nice and shiny, you know, that greenish color when I get done. You won't have this yellowish flux residue all over the bottom when they got done doing their, you know, wave soldering and normal manufacturing process. But yeah, like I say, there's a few questionable solder connections under here. Some of them just look like bad solder connections, while others are kind of questionable where somebody else did some reflowing of solder and got it blobbed up a little bit too much. So we'll see if that helps it. And like I say, that right there, that white spot, where there's obviously something arcing, definitely needs to have some investigation done, see exactly what happened there. Okay, the only thing I've done to this radio now, in addition to what you've already seen, is I have cleaned it. You can see the board's nice and shiny. All that nasty flux residue has been cleaned off. About a quarter of a pint of IPA and some serious scrubbing. And then buff it off with another brush. I always use that one, because you always end up with a white. After you clean off all that flux residue, the entire bottom of the board will have a kind of a hazy film over it, and I just go back over it, you know, keep the my fume extractor vent back here, you know, to suck the fumes so I'm not breathing them in. But anyhow, just go in and buff it off. But in any case, the other thing I've done is I fixed up a few of the solder traces. So some of the ones like they're up in here were really blobbed, and it looked like they might have been shorted together. Well, it looks like it was either one of those or one of the bad solder joints I actually fixed. The radio works now, so it's turned on, which is the only thing it would do before. It had no reception and no transmit, and it now has, well, actually I don't have it hooked up to a signal generator, but there you go. Yeah. Yeah, the sun is blaring right now, so there's really no skip. But in any case, so it's hooked up, and audio. So it works, and that's AM. That's another thing that needs to be taken care of. Is I have to remove the entire faceplate, because the band or mode selector switch is about ready to fall out of it. The nut's loose. But that was AM transmit. Audio. And there's sideband. It's a little bit low on side. AM looks like it's a little high. Sideband looks like it's a little low. So I'll have to check and see if the modulation limiter is clipped. I don't think I saw anything modified in there, but like I said, I still have to completely recap the radio and do the alignment. But yeah, basically a bad cap in the PLL module and some. It was either one of the bad solder joints I fixed or one of the what looked like it might have been a shorted. Few shorted spots where it was just solder was blobbed on there so heavy it was coming over and touching other traces. That fixed it up. Oh, and one other thing. Oh my God! Here recently, it seems to be a never-ending. Once again, I unscrew before I even did anything to this radio. The first thing I always check is the fuse, as I always say. Always check the fuse. Well, I'm glad I did, because what was in it? Look at the size of the chunk of metal inside of that thing. It is. If it shows up in the camera or not. There. It was in focus for a split second. It's a 15 amp. Yeah, this radio does not take a 15 amp fuse, people. Matter of fact, there's never been a CB radio on the planet ever made, tube type or not, that's 15 amps. So it now has a proper size fuse. So there you go. Now I got to do the basically the only thing it really needs done now is the recap and an alignment and clean it up. Pull the faceplate off, like I say, so I can tighten up the nut on the mode selector switch. And this thing, other than a good cleanup, it'll be ready to go head back to the customer.